Over to you, Jonathan.
Hello, everybody, and good morning. You're very welcome to this Enterprise Ireland webinar talking about Brexit and getting ready for customs. Well, 2020 really is the year that just keeps on giving. All of your businesses have been adapting and adjusting to the challenges posed by COVID-19. We had a lot of planning in place for Brexit had it happened last year. It turns out that COVID-19 then used a lot of the good practice that had been set up and had made you resilient as companies. But just when we're in the middle of that, Brexit has loomed large onto the horizon again. And there is a very real chance that we will begin the new trading relationship from the 1st of January with no deal in place. That is what we are staring down the barrel of right now. And that's why you, as a business, need to stop, pause, and think about what you need to do to make sure that your business is as ready as it can be for whatever happens on the 1st of January 2021. My name is Jonathan Healy. It's my distinct pleasure to be back with you again. Many of you I will have seen in person at real events over the last little while talking about Brexit. Today, it's just me and a laptop and about 230 of you watching from your homes or businesses. And we thank you very much for attending here today. It shows that you are keyed in and focused and ready to deal with the challenges that are thrown up by this new issue that could impact your business in a very serious way if you don't take action now. So let's have a look at the agenda that we're going to examine across the course of the next 50 minutes or so. We're going to talk about preparing your business for Brexit, the key actions that businesses should take now if they want to continue trading with the UK in 2021, the requirements to import goods from GB and export to GB, the requirements as well for transiting through GB, the 10-step plan to ensure you are Brexit ready, the Ready for Customs grant. That's a really important grant that is available right now and that you should consider taking out. And if we have time at the very end of that, we're going to have a questions and answers session. If you have a question for any of our speakers, use the panel that if it's either below us or to the side of us, and you can put your question in there and we will put it to our speakers, who I can tell you today are, we've got Carol Lynch, who is the Partner and International Trade Services for Customs at BDO. We have Ray Ryan, who is the Assistant Principal at the Customs Division of the Irish Revenue Commissioners, and as you might imagine, they're rather busy at the moment. And we've got Giles O'Neill, who is the Manager of the Brexit Unit at Enterprise Ireland. And in fact, let's bring Giles in. First of all, Giles, I'll invite you to turn your camera and your microphone on. Good to see you this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Giles, we are talking about this again. It is a real issue and one of concern. Why now? Why is it back on the agenda? And why do the businesses watching right now need to pay attention really closely?
Good morning, Jonathan, and good morning, everybody. 4 years. We've been through that curve of emotion on Brexit, and now we've got 99 days to the end of the transition period. Enterprise Ireland and the Irish government have been working on this for those 4 years. We've been asking you to think about it, to plan, to get some help. The question now is, are you ready? Are you ready? And what we're going to discuss today is ready for what? And this morning, it's all about the what. Specifically about the what for customs and the customs perspective. Carol and Ray providing insight and direction, and for me to be able to let you know what supports are available.
Okay, Giles, and we will be coming back to you a little bit later on as well to find out the supports that are there and the detail that you can give us on that. But for now, you can go back and enjoy the webinar like everybody else who is watching right now, about 250 of you. So that's good to see. Anytime I did an event on Brexit, it was always an eye-opener to talk about the red tape and the customs and the forms that had to be filled in. It really was complicated, and it was all predicated on there being a hard Brexit. And of course, there was a deal, and we thought that the deal was going to make life easy for us post-Brexit and at least pave the way for decent discussions. Still, we are at the point where we don't know what the outcome is going to be. So the key actions that you need to take right now, that's what we're going to focus on in the next bit. If you're looking to trade with the UK, and many of you will be, if not all of you, in 2021. So let's bring in our two other speakers, Carol Lynch and Ray Ryan. If you can turn your cameras on right now, we'll say good morning to you both. Good morning to you, Ray, and good morning to you, Carol. Ray, if you want to just give us the 10-second elevator pitch of what your role is with revenue.
Good morning, everyone. As Jonathan said, my name is Ray Ryan. I'm working as the Trader Engagement Unit, I suppose, dealing with preparing businesses for the end of transition and for Brexit and what they need to do. So that's what my unit would deal with.
Okay, pretty busy unit, I would imagine, at the moment. Carol, what's your role at BDO?
So I'm the partner in charge of customs and trade in BDO, and working with companies originally and currently international companies who be importing and exporting outside the EU, and also now taking that knowledge to apply it to our clients who are going to be importing and exporting for the first time in trading with the UK.
Okay, very good. Ray, if I can turn to you first of all, there's a hint actually of the Rolling Stones on tour, because we've all spoken at different events together on Brexit, all going back 18 months, nearly 2 years at this point. Regrettably, we're still not at the point where we have any clarity. Ray, what do businesses need to do now? I mean, are there still some who are not registered with customs? And we are just 3 months away from this.
Yeah, I think it has been ongoing for so long now, and as you said in your earlier introduction, that there was a lot of work and a lot of focus that happened towards the end of last year, and that was kind of lost with all the other impacts in 2020 that has had, COVID-19 and all that. But from my own unit, we've sent out letters in the last week to about 90,000 businesses, so hopefully the 300 or so that are on at the moment have received the letters, and it outlines the actions. But of that 90,000, there are still approximately 40-odd thousand that have not registered. So again, it's something that would be of concern to us, and Revenue are targeting those. So the key point, I suppose, is to take actions now. Now is the time. This will happen on the 1st of January. A deal or a light deal as such at this stage, or a no deal, customs formalities will apply from the 1st of January, and that's kind of what we're emphasising to businesses. So one of the key points will be, first step, register for your YORI, get that customs registration done.
And the other point then, I suppose, is you need to appoint people who are going to take responsibility here as well, because there will be declarations that need to be submitted, and somebody needs to be up to speed on that.
Yes, as part of our engagement, even in the last week, we've started calling out to businesses, actually physically ringing them to see what steps they've taken. So some of those businesses would have had that YORI number, so they have done the first step. But from speaking to them, we're getting feedback that they actually haven't assigned or made a decision on who's going to do those declarations. Is it going to be a customs agent going to do it on their behalf? Is it going to be the logistics operator or the freight forwarder that's moving their goods will do that declaration on their behalf? And they haven't actually made that decision. So a key point for businesses, one, if you've registered, have you done anything else? The next step will be to decide who's going to do that declaration for you come January 2021. If you're moving goods, who's going to make the declarations for you? There is a number of customs declarations that I'll go through in a while, but it's that key point to remember, that you need to remember to decide, who's going to do those customs declarations for you.
You need a point of contact. And the other thing, of course, everybody became obsessed with cash flow, and rightly so. During COVID-19, cash became king. There's a potential cash flow implication here as well, with duties and with VAT, that right up till now nobody had to worry about, but from the 1st of January that becomes a very real thing, and all of a sudden what might have looked like a reasonably sensible, respectable cash pile can be nibbled away at.
Yes, I think it's an important consideration for businesses that are trading on a daily, weekly or monthly basis. That's an important part of their systems to get ready to cash flow implications. So in terms of a no deal, it will be customs duty and VAT at the point of importation. In the terms of a light touch deal, it potentially will be either reduced duties or no duties, but there's still a potential for VAT at import as well there. So it's a key concern for businesses that they may not have been paying up front for the goods, but the duties will be due at the point of importation. There is facilitations around getting a deferred payment authorization. There is aspects within the Brexit Omnibus Bill that they're bringing in postponed accounting, but it's for businesses to be aware of what they are, what potentially they could be charged on their products. We've all heard of the different types of commodity codes that there is on products, and the duties are linked to those, and the VAT rates are linked to those. So it's a case of, if you know what products you're bringing in, assess what type of charges could be linked to them, and maybe plan for the first 3 months at least to see how you can manage your cash flow in that respect.
Yeah, and plan, because if you don't plan, then you're setting yourself up to fail. Carol, I remember speaking to you at an event, and my eyes were watering thinking about the amount of work that needed to be done. It's not as if companies have ignored this. They've been trying to work out what to do and when to do it, but those basic points, if they're not done now, then companies are setting themselves up for a disastrous start to 2021, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take a minimum of 3 months to get ready. So we're really into that last stretch where you need to have a plan in place, and you need to be looking at January and saying, if I work back, where does that leave me? And when I look at the work we're doing with companies, the first thing I would always say to everybody is, at this point, there's not been an awful lot done on Brexit over the last 6 months for obvious reasons with COVID, but you would have done some work, I think, last year. So dig out the plans that you put in place last year. They haven't changed. Nothing has essentially changed since last year. So if you did some preparation already, get those preparation plans out and start working through them. They'll still be valid right now. And then look at, you've got 3 months really to prepare. And critically, what we do know is, as Ray said, there's going to be import-export declarations required on 1 January. So that's now a given. We know that. So what do you need to do to that? You need to have your EORI, as Ray said, that's your first step. But then you need to understand the 54 boxes that are on SAD. So you need to be able to understand the information that you're going to give to a clearance agent. What is that information? Take advantage of the Leo's, Enterprise Ireland. If you're in the Food Industry Board, we are doing huge amounts of training programs. So absolutely, first step, contact your local Leo, contact Enterprise Ireland, take advantage of the training that's out there, understand the rules. And then you go into the other steps of, okay, how am I going to get an agent? You need to qualify and ensure that that agent is experienced and has actually been operating in this area before, isn't kind of, and has done some training on it at the very minimum. And look at your classifications.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things that you have to consider, Carol. It's a very valid point that you made, is that a lot of companies did this last year. So it is a case of just a refresher. I know we've been through a different crisis, and boy, what a crisis it's been. But companies probably have given these earlier thoughts. They might already have the ORI number, but they didn't move on past that. But now is the time to do it. Now
is the time, and certainly the same with classifications. You probably, with the potential risk of a hard Brexit on 31st of October last year, and then as we moved into the 1st of January, a little less risky, but the January risk, you probably did look at your classifications. So that's the most time consuming, in my view, in terms of how do you classify products. If you have 3 or 10 products, okay, you're going to get through that quick enough. If you've got like 6,000 or 60,000, you're not going to manually do that. You're going to have to work with a program that can filter through what's basic and what's complicated. But classifications on average will take 3 months to get through. Same with talking to your suppliers, your customers. Pick up those conversations, pick up the phone again. You probably did this. So if you didn't, the steps, I'll go to a 10-step program later on. But just I'm saying, if you did, don't let that work go to waste.
Okay, let's go on to customs imports and exports requirements, because again, Ray, we haven't had to give 2 hoots about this since the 1970s, and everything has moved freely without even. There is obviously some paperwork that some companies will have filled in, but for the most part, I mean, there's been free movement of goods, and that's about to change. The formalities. Let's talk about getting goods from destination to departure. First of all, what do people need to do in that context?
Yeah, I think it is important to remember that people just arrives at their doorstep or it's delivered to their customer without much thought on how it actually gets there. Whereas with Brexit, with transition ending on the 1st or 31st of December, you will need to know who's moving your goods. You will need to know who's actually responsible for the export if it's going into the UK, or the import if it's coming in from the UK. And again, just to, I suppose, caveat with my use of the UK, it's customs formalities will apply to goods moving between GB and Ireland and GB. Northern Ireland does not need customs declarations. That's just something to caveat from the start. I may use UK just from habit, but
I know they are slightly interchangeable. But I mean, I know there has been a lot of discussion. I suppose it's worth putting down the marker now about Britain and international law and the bill that they are talking about, their markets bill. That's not going to change the interaction between North and South. That deal will be there on January 1st.
Yeah, under the terms of the Protocol of Ireland and Northern Ireland, there will be no customs formalities for the all-island basis. So that's something to, I suppose, key from the start. Yeah. But in terms of
that's good for people to know as well. It's moving it across the Irish Sea. We're talking here, really.
Yeah. So it's those formalities. I can go through them. We'll start, I suppose, with imports, bringing in goods from GB, and there's a number of declarations required. So you have your import declaration itself, and you have a safety and security declaration. There's 2 declarations, and they're actually into 2 different systems as well. So it's to be aware of that and the different requirements that I need. As Carol referenced, there's a number of data that is required for it. So you may just be using an invoice at the moment. That mightn't have all the data necessary for an agent to complete the declaration. More than likely will not have the amount of data. So you might need to be aware of the data that's required from it. So again, having that conversation with who's doing your declaration, what data do they need from you? Can you get it in your systems easily? Can you provide the documentation required easily enough? And in terms of those declarations, they're both required in advance of departure from GB. So before you even leave GB, those declarations need to be in Irish systems. And I'll explain the reason in a while after I go through exports, but there's there's another aspect in relation to trying to maintain these just-in-time flows. Again, those declarations, they may be subject to interventions or license requirements. So again, in particular around SBS, the checks for agriculture, for food, their requirements that will be on those import declarations, their checks that will need to be done at the point of importation when they come into Dublin. And again, we mentioned the payment of duties and VAT at importation too. So that's on the import side. Again, very briefly going through it, there's a lot in it. It's not straightforward. It's depending on the type of goods you're bringing. But if you're moving goods that are, let's say, televisions, but they're in a shipment with food products, there's going to be delays. That truck in full will be held up for the checks for the SPS. So have the conversation with logistics partners. How are the goods moving? Who's taking responsibilities for those declarations? And will they get from A to B in a smooth possible process?
Is there a single person who has responsibility for declarations within a company, or do you just have to make sure the declarations are made either by yourselves, excuse me, or by your haulier?
Yeah, ultimately it's down to the importer to make sure all the formalities are met, but obviously within the supply chain, different actors would take responsibility for different sections of the movement and the different declarations that are required. There's a new import system being introduced on the 2nd of November, AIS, within revenue, and it's important that it's even for people that are dealing with third countries already, it's a new system and a new process and new procedure, so it's to be aware of those as well. We'll obviously have businesses that are brand new to customs on the 1st of January, but we'll have existing businesses that are dealing with customs already that will experience change on November, so it's maintaining that. And then in terms of exports, again, customs declarations are required, an export customs declaration and a safety and security information. The difference in this one is that the safety and security information can be combined within the export declaration, and it's usually done at the one point, and again, done in advance of departure. Again, there's interventions that it may be subject to and license requirements. And one thing to remember at export for businesses is that a lot of contracts now will be delivered duty paid or delivered door to door as such. So if that's the contract is going to maintain through 2021, that potentially means that the Irish exporter is taking responsibility for import formalities in the UK. It's just something to bear in mind. Again, have these discussions throughout your supply chain. Who's doing each movement for everything? There's always a requirement from the HMRC side and the revenue side.
Okay. I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of finger pointing and blaming when things go awry after January 1st if these conversations aren't had, Ray.
Yes, and in particular, if contracts are signed for 2021 deliveries and movement of goods and supply of goods, the contracts are what dictate, I suppose, what goes on the customs declarations and who is responsible for it. So it's definitely a key thing. Maybe it might mean changing the terms and conditions of our contracts, reassessing them, exactly deciding who's going to take responsibility for payment of duties coming into Ireland or payment of duties in the UK as well. And in terms of those pre-boarding, from a logistics point of view, they need those declarations done because you have to provide them with the actual reference numbers, because they need to complete a pre-boarding notification to allow their ships. This is on the Ro-Ro now for ferry services, so it's a new requirement in January as well.
Okay, there's 300 people watching this. I'm sweating as much as they are listening to all of this extra workload that has to go in. Carol, is there one such thing as a simple checklist that you can complete to make sure that you've everything done right? Oh, yeah, unmute yourself there, Carol. Sorry, we just can't hear you at the moment.
Yeah, the checklist is really going back to the SAD document of the customs declaration itself, which is what I was saying at the beginning. You need to understand what the data elements in that declaration are. So if you look at that customs declaration and identify, you have a list of 54 boxes, as I said, consignor, consignee, customs station, origin, Incoterms, freight details, weights, and license requirements. So you need to know what all those requirements are in a list, put it in a spreadsheet, and then prepare and work on that over the next 3 months to make sure you'll be able to give all that data to your agent and make sure you have all the backup documentation in place when you go to move a product. So do the customs work now, get the 54 boxes together, and then also work on the backup documentation that you're going to need. In terms of preparing for customs, in BDO we put together a 10-step program which we can send out to everybody after this presentation.
Yeah, we're going to get to that 10-step program later on, because there's other things
I wasn't sure. It came up on the screen.
I know. I think somebody's finger slipped on the presentation. But very good. You were well trained. You were ready to go. The question I want to ask you before we move on to transitioning through GP, which is a big story that we're talking about across the water today as well. What happens if you're ready to go on January 2nd and you have got a box full of the most essential requirements for your business that is due to arrive, and then it doesn't arrive because you haven't done that? The knock-on effect of not getting this right is significant, because that might delay production, it might delay customers getting delivery. I mean, this is the nightmare scenario for any business, and it's very real, because we don't know how serious this is going to be in terms of logistics.
Yeah, if you look at the papers today, Michael Gove issued a letter to UK companies, which is causing mayhem across the water in terms of the delays that is expected for hauliers and for trucks coming through the ports in the UK, through to a lack of documentation, through to a lack of understanding of what needs to be in the cabs. And if you're transiting, and a lot of our goods going to the continent, 80% of those will transit through the UK, through the tunnel to get over to the continent. You need to make sure at this point that you are able to operate what's called the transit system, that you or your haulier has access to the NCTS to lodge your transit declaration, and you or your haulier has a guarantee in place to cover the duties that are being suspended, which means talking to the bank, which means 3 months, as we know, in any situation, to get an authorization and a guarantee. And if you're time sensitive, you may also want to look at getting an authorization for an authorized consignor or consignee status, which means you can actually present those goods and get them cleared at your premises as opposed to at the ports. So if you are involved in transit, yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, there's different options in transit. Ray, let's talk about transitioning through Britain. There was lovely conversation at one point about green lanes, and Irish trucks are going to fly up and go straight past all the queuing lorries and onto the Channel Tunnel or onto the ferry. Is that going to happen?
I think from a transiting point of view, it's back to have you the declarations done. Anything we've done for the last number of years, as you've experienced too, Jonathan, is telling businesses what they need to do, and in particular on that transiting piece. So if you have the documentation in terms of moving, there's obviously delays within UK. It's going to happen, especially going down to Dover and that. But if you have the correct documentation, there should not be an issue. The UK have signed up to the Common Transit Convention, so you're meeting those requirements. Sorry, the Common Transit Convention is what allows you to use the transiting system, the NCTS system. If you've done your declarations there and you have everything ready that you need requirements, but the important thing to remember if you're transiting goods from Ireland through the UK into France is that you're dealing with 3 different customs authorities. So the transit declaration is done on NCTS. They all have access. So all the different member states will have access to that, including the UK. The difference is that we have a pre-boarding requirement. The UK have obviously announced some of their boarding operation managements. They have requirements within the UK itself to allow goods to move. And then on arrival into France, they need to have another pre-boarding notification there. So in terms of the logistics of organising that, ensuring that your logistics partner has all the declarations ready, it's not just having your transit declaration done. It's remembering that there's a flow through a number of different countries.
And it has to follow that flow. Of course, if it gets on a boat in France, it comes straight into Rosslare, Dublin, or Cork. Not a bother.
Yeah, and we're encouraging businesses to look into the capacity that's available on the direct route as well, because if you can get a direct route from Ireland to the continent, you don't have to do any customs formalities. And it's
everybody loves dealing with revenue, as you know. So your guys are the friendly guys in this scenario, but you're now dealing with 3 different regulatory authorities. Even though we're moving it from an EU country to an EU country, the fact that it goes into that 3rd country means you now have to deal with the French as well. Is that just not a logistical nightmare that companies will struggle to cope with?
If you're not used to the transit formalities in general terms, which a lot of companies wouldn't be if they're just doing from EU to EU currently, it is going to be a complex situation. It is just another declaration in terms of a transit declaration. And as Carol referenced it too there is a simplified transit process which allows you to raise your declaration at your premises and move it to into premises within France, so away from the ports, so away from where the congestion is going to be. So that's something we would encourage businesses to look at. Again, there's authorizations required around that. Applications need to be submitted as soon as possible. There's guarantees linked to that. So decisions need to be made as soon as possible if you're looking at any of these type of things.
I don't mean to be negative here, Ray, but it ain't going to be easy in January, is it? I mean, I know 7,000 trucks lined up in Kent is one thing, but there inevitably will be challenges for hauliers in that early phase, and people need to prepare for that.
Yes, and I think it's key. That's why the conversation is key for businesses, that make the decisions you can within your business, and then have the discussion with your hauliers, with your freight forwarders and your logistics chain to see, are they prepped? Do they know what their requirements are? So if you have your bit done, you just need to make sure that your partners also have their bits done. and that will aid the process anyway. I can't guarantee there won't be delays, but it will aid the process if you know that within your supply chain, everyone has ticked the box for what they should have done on day one.
If we can turn to you, Carol, to talk about this, the NCTS that's been referenced there to lodge your transit declaration. Again, does the haulier do that? Do you do that? Do you just make sure it's filled in? How do you take responsibility for that?
It's either going to be you or the haulier. You're going to have to talk to the hauliers. I don't think the hauliers are that keen on doing it because of the fact that there needs to be a guarantee. But at the same time, the guarantee covers the movement of the goods and it confirms that those goods are going to arrive. So the only person who has control over that is going to be the haulier, or I suppose yourself if you're paying the haulier and have confirmation of arrival at the other end. So either can do it. It's a matter of lodging through into the NCTS system. It's the guarantee, I think, is the major issue there. Who's going to take the guarantee and who's going to lodge that guarantee with customs to cover the duty liability and ensure that those goods arrive at their destination without being diverted.
The driver will have to have a lot of documents with them as well. I mean, it has to be loaded onto the electronic system, but I'm presuming there will be physical and manual checks, at which point the documentation will have to be produced, will it?
Yeah, Ray, you probably know more about this aspect than me, but I'm hoping that most of it's going to go electronic from the that you can show it on your, like a clearance slip you could show on your phone, and maybe the tag could be on the phone as well.
Yeah, a lot of oh, sorry, yeah, just come in on that as well. It's exactly as Carol said, the pre-boarding notifications and a lot of requirements will be electronic, so it'll be done through the smartphone that drivers would have. But in relation to the tag, that's usually a printout anyway from the premises or from the export office itself, and the driver travels with it. And usually that's almost for the drivers themselves to have a physical paper that they still haven't fully moved electronically. So we're still expecting, but again, it's going to as much as possible electronically because it's systems dependent on less trucks stopping, the better in terms of stamping and all that. It's trying to have the processes in place that you have everything electronic, that you can do your checks and your approvals and your clearances electronically, so there's less trucks stopping to get a physical stamp.
That transitioning, Carol, again, it's easier to go through France if you can. I mean, are you recommending people go direct if they can and have start looking into this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know from the logistics side and the time side that it's more expensive to go direct, and it's also going to take longer, which is a problem if it's perishable products. So you're going to have to build that into your costings. But certainly from a customs perspective, it will be much easier. What you want to do is stay within the EU. You don't want a situation where you're leaving Ireland/the EU, entering the UK, a new third country, coming back into the EU. You want to stay within the single market.
Oh, I think we may have lost Carol there in mid-sentence. Ray, I still have you, do I?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, no, I think it's that encouragement of if you can at all look at the direct routes, that's something you can look at. In terms of the guarantee as well, it is something that businesses would need to look into, and more than likely someone in the logistics supply chain would have access to transit guarantee currently, and they just may need to up it to cover your own business's goods if they're doing it that way.
Ray, I mean, I don't want to sound overly negative here, but I mean, this is nuts. I mean, we know this has been coming and preparation has been made, but there's absolutely zero incentive to keep transitioning stuff through the UK. I mean, it makes no sense anymore, realistically, but people are still going to have to do it.
Yeah, I think that's part of the business models currently, is that it is faster to go through that way currently. Can't guarantee that in January, depending on obviously the readiness from the UK side and what exactly is happening at the ports. But what all businesses can do for now is plan either to make the decisions, are they going to go the direct route, then there's no customs formalities. But if they are going to go over the land bridge, they need to have their transit guarantees, they need to have their transit declarations ready to go and meet all the requirements that they need to meet to move those goods.
And I'm also conscious that there are companies watching right now who have to do business with the UK. Maybe there is a particular part that needs to come from their largest trading partner still might be in the UK. So yes, they're going to have to do this to a certain degree, aren't they?
Yeah, and even some of it is that some of the current business models, they have the warehousing in the UK coming from the EU, and then it's forwarded onto Ireland as they need it as well, so that the bases may need to change, or the business models may need to change in those terms as well.
Okay, let's see if we can hear Carol. Carol, can you hear us? Oh, we can't hear. No, we can't hear you. We can see you, so I'm not sure if you're any good at sign language, but we'll try and unmute you again there. If one of the organisers might do that, if we can just unmute Carol on the second form there. I just can't do it. We're going to try it one more time. Carol, I'm going to talk now. We could hear you now, Carol. Say again.
Yeah, is that okay?
We can hear you. Hurrah. Very good, because I was about to do your 10 points and I don't know what they are. So I would have read them very well in the style of Ron Burgundy, but I think it's better coming from the expert from BDO. Let's move on to your 10 points, the 10 steps that people need to take right now for Brexit preparedness. And some of them probably haven't done already. One of the things I used to do when I was in the room with people was hands up here, who's fully ready for Brexit? And no hand would have gone up. I'm guessing of the 300 people watching right now, no hand is going up either. So Carol, talk us through your 10 points.
Okay, so on the 10-step plan, the first one is, I don't know if it can be moved on to the next slide there. So the first one, as we said, is ensure you have an EORI registration. So that's the easy one. If you haven't got the EORI registration, go online to Ross, request it, you'll have it within 24 hours. It really is the simplest thing to do, but you cannot move your goods into or out of the EU without one. If you are acting as the importer into the UK, you're also need a GB EORI. So make sure you have that as well. Then the second one is, this one is dependent on the free trade agreement. If we don't have a free trade agreement in place, then you're going to need to pay customs duties on arrival in Ireland and on arrival in the UK. So you need to decide, do you want to pay that for every single customs entry, every single arrival, or do you want to put in place a deferred payment authorization whereby you defer the payment of your duty till the month after the month of import, which is much more efficient from cash flow perspective. But in order to do that, you're going to need to have a deferred payment authorization with revenue, and you're going to need to get a guarantee from the bank. In total, that takes about 3 months. So we are really at the wire in terms of getting a deferred payment. And the problem for companies at the moment, of course, is we don't know whether we're going to have a deferred payment authorization or not. So I would recommend just even getting the paperwork together, opening the conversation with your bank, and then over the next 2 weeks, hopefully we'll have a clear idea of whether there is going to be a trade agreement or not. The third step is critical. This had started immediately. Your tariff classifications. Tariff classifications are probably the most complicated thing for many companies, particularly in today's world where products are newly developed and not necessarily easy to classify. So you need to have the correct tariff classification regardless of whether there is duties or it's statistical information on the import declaration, because a lot of security controls will also stem from this, as well as licensing. So you need to start your classification project immediately. Get those classifications. It's the very first thing on a declaration that will be audited by customs post-entry. So do start that work immediately. Then step 4, which is on the next page, is look at how you're lodging the declarations. So are you going to bring that in-house and lodge your declarations in-house? Are you going to employ a clearance agent? Are you going to ask your freight forwarder to do it on your behalf, your haulier to do it on your behalf? And you need to do a business case to decide which is the best option for that in terms of your goods, the cost of actually bringing people in-house to do it, the cost of actually employing someone to do it, and then also how I would say look at how your goods move. Are they moving from like 2 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock at night, in which case you need 24/7 support, or is it a 9 to 5 operation, in which case you can do it quite easily probably yourselves. And if you are doing it yourselves, make sure that you sign up with the EI Clear Skills Initiative, which will teach you how to do that. In terms of then you need to talk to your suppliers and customers, check who's acting as the importer, who's acting as the exporter. A lot of Irish companies selling into the UK are selling on a delivered duty paid basis, so their customer is expecting that they will act as the importer into the UK, in which case you need to have your GB EORI, you're going to need to register for VAT in the UK, and you need to be able to complete import declarations in the UK and understand the UK rules. Now, the slight benefit on that is that from the 1st of January to 30th of June, there are simplifications in the UK if you are established in the EU, which will allow you to defer the lodging of declarations and defer the payment of duties, but there's very strict controls attached to that, so you need to understand those. Step 6 is the licenses, and this has become an issue, particularly over the last week. It's really become a big issue. So if you trade in agricultural goods or plant-based products, you need to make sure you're registered with DAFM and you understand the rules in the UK as well. But there are also other controls that the NSAI are explaining to everybody. So if you've gone to the NSAI website, you'll see the other controls in relation to standards, CE marking, notifications, authorised importers, authorised representatives. So again, If you are acting as an importer, you may have obligations there where you wouldn't have before if you're buying from a UK importer. Then on the next one, step 7, review your VAT position. As there are VAT simplifications for paying your import VAT under your VAT returns, as long as you're VAT registered. So you do need to talk to your VAT experts to understand the VAT aspect. For Northern Ireland, as Ray said, we're fine for imports or for movement of goods on the island of Ireland. But if you're importing from GB to NI, there are new requirements there, which will be dealt with by the joint committees. The simplifications I've discussed that are available up to 30th June. And then lastly, talk to your hauliers, talk to your freight forwarders. They're the goods who also, they're the people who are shipping your goods and moving your goods. You need to make sure that they have procedures in place for arriving at the port, for having that documentation either electronically or in the cab, that they know what happens when they get on the boat, that they know what happens when they get off the boat. You're not going to get clearance in Dublin Port until you're 20 minutes outside of the port. So if you get pulled for a documentary check or a physical check coming off the boat, does your driver know what to do? So those are the critical 10 steps that I've kind of ran through very fast, but in terms of preparing for 1st of January, these would be what I'd be focusing on right now.
Okay. Right, meaty is the way I would describe those 10 points. There's a lot in them. 2 questions that emerged from me, and by the way, get your questions in, folks. Use the panel that is over that side of the screen or below the screen if you're watching us on the webinar. First of all, British companies, and I know BDO is a big company, and you're probably dealing with some British companies as well. Are they in any way prepared for all of this? Because we are talking here to Irish companies who are getting prepared, but could the British companies that we're interacting with, could this come as a terrible shock to all of them, and as a result the system further grind to a halt? Because it's all been land of milk and honey kind of commentary in the UK. This is going to come as quite the shock, isn't it?
Well, certainly over the last 2 weeks, we are dealing with UK companies on a daily basis who are looking at establishing in Ireland. What are the requirements? How can they act as the importer into Ireland? How can they VAT register? What are the requirements from a tax perspective? What are the requirements from a registered person perspective? What about labelling laws? So I would say that I'm on the phone with BDO clients in the UK absolutely daily at the moment, and that's really picked up over the last 2 weeks in terms of looking at Ireland as an easy market in the sense that you're right beside the UK, and secondly to make sure that they have access to the EU by registering in the EU.
But it's all a little rushed, I'm guessing, and that's probably just going to add to the confusion that is going to be there as time goes on. I mean, you mentioned regulations. I mean, one of the conversations that we were at a previous event came down to the size of the pallet that's used. And if you're bringing a consignment in, if there's a truck and one pallet on the truck isn't right, then the whole truck gets slowed down. Is that still a concern?
Yeah. So if you're involved with groupage, that's going to be extremely difficult, because if, as you say, one pallet needs to be offloaded at the port, how are you going to get that one pallet off and the other 9 stay on? And again, Ray, come in on this one, probably know more about it than me, but I know certainly groupage for companies is becoming less and less an ideal solution, because it's going to risk the timeframes.
Yeah, and Ray, if I can come to you on that one, I mean, that's very unfair on companies. If the 9 companies that own the 9 pallets did the right thing, and one company made a mistake or didn't do it right, everybody loses out in that scenario, and arguably customs won't be able to do much about it.
Well, it could even be that the 10 companies did everything right, and that one pallet is just required for control. It's not a case of that one company didn't do anything, because if they didn't do anything, they shouldn't be on the ferry in the first place, coming across. But no, if the 10 companies did everything right and some of them are called for control, then everything is called into the compound, and there will be delays on the full truckload of goods as such. So it is something that business is just, again, it's that conversation with your haulier that you never really had to worry how they were bringing the goods in before. But now if you have, in particular if it's a just-in-time model, if you're for manufacturing or something like that, and majority of the products aren't subject to checks. It's usually around the food products, agri products, and other agency products that are required to get checked. So it's just something to be aware of, that how are your goods actually moving.
Okay, and it's worth mentioning as well that the slide deck is going to be available to people after this event as well through Enterprise Ireland. I want to bring Giles back in if I can. Giles O'Neill, manager of the Brexit unit at Enterprise Ireland. Giles, if you can turn your camera and your mic back on there, because there's a lot to absorb here, isn't there? The people are taking in all of this information. A lot of it isn't new, but it is, I mean, I'm not importing and exporting, and I'm overwhelmed by this. I understand if people's blood pressure was up. What are people telling Enterprise Ireland about their levels of preparedness and where we're at just 3.5 months out from this?
Well, we've done a recent piece of analysis on this, and we've asked companies, all Irish companies, in a survey, based on their priorities, just how ready they are. And of the top 4 priorities that companies have listed, 42% of them are saying that they're either fully ready or significantly ready. Now, how good that is, I'm not sure. But look, and I really would like to.
They think they're ready. It's probably the best answer.
I think they're ready. If I can go back to what Carol and Ray are saying, there isn't a need to panic, right? But you do need to have someone or some buddies in your businesses to own this, and make sure that your service provider, if you're using one, is clear on the roles and responsibilities in order to get this done. You know, as Carol said earlier, many of you have plans already. They need to be reviewed. And if you don't have one, Ray and Carol, they've given you a really strong framework and structure that you can use to develop one quickly.
Can we talk about the Ready for Customs grant? Because to be fair to Enterprise Ireland, consistently throughout this, they've been offering people ways in which they can be supported. The filling out of the forms alone, getting ready for customs, making sure that you don't end up being the one truck that doesn't come across the sea because the paperwork isn't ready and your supply chain falls apart. What is the grant? How can people qualify for it, and what use is it to them at this juncture?
Well, now that the slide is up, everyone will be reading it. But as they're reading it, what I'd quickly like to say is that, you know, there's a lot of support available. And if you think about it in the context of customs and purely customs, you know, if you are a local enterprise office client, smaller businesses, they mirror what others do. So there's a Brexit mentoring program for smaller businesses. There's a prepare your business for customs and a series of virtual webinars going on. There's scorecards, there's checklists. Use them, right? Board BIA, you mentioned it yourself, Jonathan, at the start. They're offering a huge range of supports around this. And in terms of Enterprise Ireland for customs and getting customs ready, there's the online Customs Inside course, there's still the Brexit scorecard, there's the Be Prepared grant, and there's Act On initiatives that you can talk to somebody who knows, really specializes in this around customs and get some insight and some help. But now, as you mentioned, there's a Ready for Customs grant. And it's the first time I've been asked to invest 20 million into companies in 3 months. It's that exciting. We have to build capacity, and people listening have to take additional people on. It's unlikely to contribute to your sales and your profit line before January. It's an investment, and they have to be trained and they have to be in place. We will share that, the initial risk, providing a grant of up to €9,000, which covers salaries and overheads, contributing significantly to that upfront cost of building the capacity and taking people on. It's really easy to apply. It's a 2-page online application form. It's really simple, it's really quick, and it's really quick to get approved. So readyforcustoms.com. You can call us if you have any questions. You can call Sally, you can call Paul, you can call Stephen. The number is 017272727, or you can email us at readyforcustoms@enterprise-ireland.com.
Okay, and the list of qualifying and eligible enterprises are on the screen there as well, which is good. I want to get to the questions and answers if I can, please. I mean, one for me, if I can be a bit selfish, first of all, Carol, is there any opportunity in all this crisis? I mean, you hinted there that there are companies looking to get in here and to use Ireland as a staging post to go to Europe now that there's going to be huge challenges. Is there some opportunity for some of the businesses who are watching right now? And if so, what could it possibly be?
Well, I suppose, yeah, I mean, like in every crisis, there's always some opportunity when things change to actually identify.
Oh, I'm afraid that the link has gone down again, Carol, just when you were in full flow there. I'm going to come back to you if I can. Ray, I'm going to go with a question to you, if I may. You outlined a lot of things there, but what do you recommend that companies do right now as the most important element here? Ray Ryan, if I can put that to you.
Yeah, I think it's take those actions, take those steps. As Giles said, it's not time to panic. It's actually time to take steps to put someone responsible to make that URI registration, to make that decision on who's going to do the declarations. I tried to cover a lot there in a short kind of time frame. So there is revenue information online, and we also have a webinar coming up on the 4th and 5th of October, which is over 2 days. I tried to cover in 4 or 5 minutes there. So I think it's something that people can look at.
But you have a bit more time to play with there to go through the detail of where the devil always lives. Can you ask Ray, says David, if there is a plan to defer VAT payment from point of entry as was planned previously? Obviously, that would have been discussed a good bit around the time. Is that still a thing?
It's in the part of the omnibus bill that's coming to, I think, in the next few weeks. It's going to be finalised. It's in it. It's expected it will be passed. So once it's passed, it will be announced. And that will obviously ease the kind of concerns around VAT at the point of importation, and you can treat it as your normal bi-monthly returns. So it is something that is in there. It's expected to be in place for the 1st of January, and hopefully it will all go ahead as planned.
There's a question in here from Alison. Where do we find that SSE document with the 53 boxes that Carol referenced? Carol, I hopefully we can hear you again now. Where is that document and how can people find it? No, regrettably, we can't hear you. I think you're muted, Carol. If we can try unmuting you. Technology is great, lads, isn't it? It really is. No, I think you're still muted. Ray, could you answer that one? Maybe Carol, you can just wave, but Ray, you might be able to answer where we can find the SSE document.
It's not, isn't a full document available. It's the best place to go would be to an agent or freight forwarder that has them, or the likes of Carol BDOs that have those kind of lists. In terms of what we have in revenue is actually the full data elements that are required, and it's not kind of
okay. So in other words, agents will help you with that level.
More business
because it is
what they'd like to promote from a revenue point of view.
No, absolutely, I understand that. There's multiple services available, I'm sure is the right way of describing it. There's no simple way. The bottom line, Ray, there's no simple way. This is complicated, and if it is complicated, and if you're a smaller business, you're going to need help here because you don't want to get caught out.
Yes, I think it's use all the supports that are available, not just the information that revenue is giving you, but as Giles has said, local enterprise offices are a good starting point. Enterprise Ireland, they have courses available, short courses that will help you in those boxes, those data elements, those kind of requirements. If you present them, even if you go to an agent with an actual invoice that you've done in the last 3 months, ask them what else is needed. That type of question is what you can ask. Kind of bring it down to what you've done already.
Yeah, and Giles, if I can go back to you, just a last word on this to you. You've outlined all the supports that are there. There are many companies watching us right now who've been through the ringer in the last couple of months with COVID. They've pivoted, they've learned, they've made themselves lean. There will be a concern that can we take another hit from this? I mean, what can you say to them in terms of hope that this too will pass?
Brexit won't pass. Brexit is going to be staying with us. So companies really do need to be ready. And the other point which I would really like to emphasize, and it has been explicitly mentioned by both Ray and Carol earlier on, you've got to talk to your British customers. You've got to be clear as to the roles and responsibilities and the expectations. Who's doing what, who's taking responsibility for importing, who's taking responsibility for exporting, and keep those lines of communication open. If you want to continue having the same level of business with your British customers come January the 1st, you've got to be prepared.
Yeah, and the time to act is now. We have discussed this to death. We have worried about it for long enough. The time for action is very much at this moment as we stare down at Brexit coming in. Definitely on the 1st of January, quite possibly without any deal in place. Giles O'Neill of Enterprise Ireland, Ray Ryan of Revenue, thank you both very much. Carol, your microphone still isn't working, but we'll wave at you because that's the best we can do to say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for your time today, folks. Thanks to everybody who has been watching right around the country this morning. It is a challenge, but it's a challenge you can no longer afford to ignore. I'm not saying you have ignored it, but maybe there might be elements that we've touched upon to date that you haven't gone into the detail that you need to go into. The supports are there, they're on the screen, they're ready for customs grants. Prepare for Brexit.ie. Maybe you haven't visited it in a while because you were, let's face it, dealing with other things. Go back to it. And the detail on that Brexit seminar for revenue, it's a 2-day event. Ray Ryan is limbering up for that. He can't wait for it. 2 days of talking about all the customs details. really good luck with that. The details are on the screen there as well. Thanks everybody for watching this morning. In a strange way, it's been nice to talk about something other than COVID-19. The real pity was that the other thing was Brexit. We look forward to the day we're talking about happier, more positive things, but take what you can from this morning. Good luck with whatever comes with Brexit and other challenges facing your business. And just remember that the future is bright. We're just not there yet. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll talk again soon.